Yep. So we are live now, and yep. Just wait for a few minutes. Awesome, awesome, awesome. GM, and we are starting to get the catch up. So yep. Hello everyone. My name is Yash Kirk, and I'm from India. So yeah, this is Developer DAO episode 13 from on where we are going to get introduced to Rainbow Kit at Wagmi libraries, which will be transition from Web to Web3 front end. And yeah, the Developer DAO hosts these workshops weekly on Wednesday, almost the same time. It usually on 4:30 p.m. UTC. Today it's on 5 p.m. UTC. So right now over here we have Billy to introduce us to the Rainbow Kit and Wagmi libraries. Like Billy, welcome on the stage, and it will be great if you could introduce to the whole audience. And there we go.
Yeah. How's it going, man? So yeah, I am Billy Jitsu, and if you follow me on Twitter, it'd be Papi Billy because I kind of lost a bet. I'm from California, USA, near Hollywood. So I rarely go out, but I do go out to go to the movies, so it's fun over here. But yeah, so I joined Developer DAO kind of in the early days when I saw a Natter tutorial and I discovered what it was. It was a little overwhelming for me in the beginning because there was so many different things and so many projects happening. So I kind of like laid low, and then I joined a Web3 con, and I met a lot of people in Developer DAO, and it was really fun. And then I started to get more and more involved, and started connect with people and network
Yeah.
and learn a lot of things, right? So I was a beginner dev and primarily just focused on blockchain and solidity. So I'd crack these new projects and things, but if I wanted somebody else to try it, I didn't have a front end
Yeah.
and know how to make a front end, right? So,
Yeah.
all the tutorials out there was always ethers.js. It's like, okay, cool, I'll make this. And it only works with MetaMask. And then if, I try to show my friend, he's only working on mobile. It's like, oh man, how do I make, Wallet Connect? How do I do Coinbase Wallet? All these people with different wallets. So, I would look for guys
Right.
back and forth. And then Rainbow Kit came out, and it was like so revolutionary for me because I really struggled with React Web3 or Web3 modal. So it was
Right.
really refreshing to work. But then I was like, how do I use this? How do I use Wagmi? How do I use Rainbow Kit? And then reading the docs for me was really difficult because it was under the assumption that I was a front end developer. And I had no idea how to make this thing work. So I was trying to find examples and stuff. So I ended up writing a full guide. Once I figured it out, I wrote a full guide on version 5, and I released it, and I got a lot of really good feedback because nobody had ever created a guide from like A to Z where you build the back end, build the front end, connect it, and actually use functions. Everybody stops at connects wallet, or everybody stops at at some function. So I went through the whole thing. Like, this is the whole project. And so Wagme does like a new update release that breaks everything like every 6 weeks. So today we're going to be
Right.
covering the front end for a lot of these guys that are working on Web2 that really want to focus on connecting to Web3, that just want to use existing contracts or get connected. This is a great place to start. You're not limited to like one library. There's a couple few things, things that we can work on to show you how you can connect your cool website to the blockchain. And that's hopefully what I get for everybody here. If you have questions, shoot away. And it's more about like understanding the docs and what each function does.
That's really awesome. That's really awesome. So, just for the clearance, like, do we require any prerequisites for this workshop from the audience?
Well, so I originally used to start with author tutorials with create React app, and I
Yeah.
struggled a lot with React 18 because a lot of the wallet libraries wouldn't work, and Wagme was having some issues. So I ended up migrating to Next.js. And it's almost the same, just a few little tweaks here and there, but pretty much the concept is exactly the same. And those are the links I shared in there with you earlier to get that going. And then for front end, I didn't know CSS, and there was a ton of different frameworks out there. I
Yeah.
ended up using Tailwind because I found a lot of tutorials that I was working on use Tailwind. So in order for me to understand these things, I learned Tailwind. If
Yeah.
it was on Chakra, I would have learned Chakra. It was just more about what I needed to learn at the time to move forward. So those were the two frameworks that I did use. So to save time, I've already kind of loaded that up. This is a Next.js framework with Tailwind configuration. So, instead of watching me install these libraries,
Yeah.
I kind of just have that going. And then we're going to go through the docs and get something set up. And then I think you posted the links, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on the description channel if anyone wants to
Yeah.
visit the docs
Yeah.
or visit the blog. He wrote it before.
Yeah. And so we're going to be using the library kit. I've already deployed a contract address. If you look at the gift, you'll see that out there. I had this deployed on Mumbai Polygon Scan, and the contract has been verified. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. All that really matters is the contract address. And it's just we're going to do the whole thing from the beginning. So like, if there's any other questions, this could be a code along if you have a library set all ready to go. You don't have to use
Yeah.
Tailwind. You can use your own front end. This is more about focusing about connecting your wallet and getting going. If we look at my current build, let me just yarn dev it and go localhost. It'll show that we have just the basic next starter kit. If it was create React, it would show the create React with that system setting. So I'm gonna push to the side and we're just gonna start building. Right?
That's very cool. Then that's very cool.
So I'm
So
gonna put
yeah,
this. Go ahead.
and just go ahead and start the work.
Okay, so the two things that we're going to be looking at is Rainbow Kit, which is actually the wallet that you're going to use to connect to your dApp, right? And everybody hates like when you go to a website, like and it automatically prompts you to connect a dApp. A lot of tutorials
Yeah.
automatically get you connected, and then how we're going to interact with our contract is going to be Wagmi. So on those links, you'll see these two issues right here. And then I also want to, so you're not limited to Rainbow Kit. What we're learning here today can also be applied to something called Family, which is the exact same thing like Connect Wallet. It's a little bit cleaner. Sometimes some people have been moving over there. It's a fairly new wallet system. So Rainbow Kit and Family are interchangeable. So if you have questions or you just don't like Rainbow Kit wallet, you can totally use the same. So, we're starting on a blank slate, right? And so on our pages, for those that use React, index and app are basically reversed, right? But most of our stuff that we're going to configure here is going to be in our app. Right. And so I'm going to take it from the top. Let me just stop this server. And we're going to go ahead and view the docs. And this is where, I totally got stuck. Right. So I'm going to go to the installation. And this is a nice setup if you use TypeScript. And for a beginner like me, I had a hard time. I was like, I don't know TypeScript. I learned JavaScript. Right. So that's like, I didn't want to learn an extra step. So I'm going to do the manual setup right here. So we're just going to go ahead and install this. Get that going. It's a quick install. Basically, it uses the Rainbow Kit, right? Installs the Wagmi library and installs the ethers.js library, which is pretty much the standard for the system. While this is installing, let's go ahead and go down into this next import. And this is the part that kind of like stuck me because I just copy and paste without knowing what's actually in here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that in. And we're going to paste this underneath. So we're going to keep our component styles for our Tailwind, but we're also going to be installing the Rainbow Kit styling system. And then the Rainbow Kit just has this part right here, and this part is the Wagmi import. So this gets me the default wallet. This is, injected connector, which is MetaMask. This is going to give me the Coinbase wallet. This is going to give me the Wallet Connect, right? And then it's going to have a built-in set of providers. Right? So that's all we're pulling from Rainbow Kit. And then from here, the Wagmi library, this is where we get to choose the chain we're going to work on. Let's say we're going to go on Ethereum, or we're going to go on Polygon, or Avalanche, or any of those other ones. We can go ahead and import. They have a preset library where we're also going to cover, if we have a custom chain that doesn't exist on here. Then we have configurations for the chain. This create client kind of builds our wallet for us. Depending if they use MetaMask or if they use Wallet Connect, it handles all those kind of difficult things that you had to do manually all in one set. And then this Wagmi config is basically our wrapper that wraps our entire component at the very end, right? These are our providers, and by default, it gives us Alchemy. If if you're aware with it, you have Infura, you have Alchemy. There's Anchor, Pocket Network. They have two built-in ones. If you didn't want to use Alchemy, you can use another one. There's also default public provider. Let's say you don't have an Alchemy key and you want to, use something really on the fly. Like I did this demo, and the one that's out is working on a public provider, so you can use that. It's always nice to have additional providers. If you use out all your kind of credits or requests, you kind of get shut down. So it's happened to the best of us. So understanding this was kind of key to me as well. And so on the second part down, we're going to go ahead and just copy this down. And it's literally a copy and paste. I'm just going to go ahead and move that in here. And so again, we're now, you see these things are highlighting up on the primary. We're doing the configure chains. This is where we choose our chains. You see that we have mainnet, we have Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum. If I change this out, you can have a list of different libraries of what they have available. AV, I think, let me see, Polygon Mumbai. So it has a list of different libraries that you can use. And so when you connect your wallet, you can see you have different options to switch networks on the fly. And here we have our providers, right? And so as we have the Alchemy provider and the public provider, we can adjust whatever we want. Now we can put our key right here and have that. But when you upload it, you're going to, show your key to everybody, and then somebody can look at your GitHub or your deployment and see what you have. So what I do is I do like a process.env. So let me go ahead and go back. And then I have this env example that will, let me go here, my Alchemy ID, and then you can hide it on the, let's say Vercel or anything, or upload your .env and hide that. I also use this for my contracts. So I'll have like next public contract address and then put it on here. There's a lot of front end attacks that happen, on the server side. So the more you can make them work, the less likely it can be. But for now, I'm just going to, your Alchemy ID here, because we're not even going to use this one at the time. We're going to use a public provider, right? And so now we have the default wallets where it creates this connector, and then you can rename this to, like my ADF.
Excuse me, just a second, Billy. Would you please just zoom in to your VS Code? Like there's
Oh,
a request in the chat box.
is that better, or one more zoom?
Um, I guess it would be better if one more.
One more zoom. Okay, there we go. Pretty large. I
Yeah.
just like that. There we go. Okay. So yeah, this connector basically gets your wallets, and you can give it an app name. You can give it any name you want, the name of your website or anything as such. And then once you have your connectors, you get these two providers, the provider, the connectors, and then it creates a full client in your Wagmi client, right? So it's taking your providers that you've set here, it's taking the connectors that you've set here with your wallets, and then, whether you want to auto connect or not, I usually leave it true, because once people connect to the website, I don't want them to have to keep doing it every time. It creates this Wagmi client that we're going to use in just a moment, right? So far, so good. Everybody in good shape here?
I guess so.
Yeah, okay. So then right here, we have this final part that is going to connect the whole thing in here that wraps our app, which is, and this is confusing because I was like, wait, what's my app? It is actually, oops, sorry about that. Let me move this over to the side. Oops, there we go. So this component is actually what my app is, so this example kind of throws you off of like, wait a minute, your app, but this is what it is. So we're going to go ahead and copy this whole thing. Put here, let me just do a return. This looks ugly. And let me go ahead and copy this out. And this goes into my app. And I'm just going to close that bracket. There we go. And so you'll see, let me just go ahead and save that so it looks cleaner. So we have our component that we had previously, right? Wrapped by the Rainbow Kit provider, which then pulls in the chains that we're going to use. And then this is wrapped by our Wagmi config with our client, with our Wagmi client that we have here that we created based off these two systems. And this will get you a basic Connect wallet, right? So like if I go to index, right, and it's giving us an example right here, is if we wanted to add the Connect button, all we have to do is import our Connect button wallet right here from Rainbow Kit. So I go to our main page and just kind of throw that in there. Uh-oh. Let me grab that again. And then literally just add Connect button. And I'm just going to go ahead and do this right under the main here. And then I go ahead and start this up. Wait for this to load. Let me go ahead and disconnect. But you'll see that I have this Connect wallet right here in the button, right? And then when I click it, I can choose the type of wallet I want. I'm going to go ahead and choose MetaMask. It's going to ask if I want to connect. So it's going to have me switch. Sure, I'll switch network, right? And then I can switch networks here. I can click it here. It'll switch my network based on the list. So if you look back at this entire list at our app.js, you can see that we had, mainnet Ethereum, Polygon, and Optimism. If I took this one out, it would not show on the list. Let me go ahead and disconnect that and connect. Let me refresh. Connect. Okay, hold on. And then I'll pick the drop down menu. I think this is freaking out a second here. I can switch between Ethereum and so now you can see that the other chain is gone. So you can easily switch networks between that by a function of this adding a chain and taking away a chain. It's really simple to move that forward. So what happens if you want to create an app, and this was a big problem I had, that doesn't exist, right? Like let's say I want to go Avalanche, right? And it's not here, right? So you have to pull in something that's called a JSON RPG, and we have to manually do it. And so like it was a little difficult to understand that, but I'm going to go ahead and import, and this is called JSON. To make sure I have it here. Let me actually, I don't want to do this out of memory. I want to do this in the docs here. Further examples. Give me 1 second. I don't want to hold you guys too long here. Wait a second. Okay, I'm just going to pull it in from this docs that I have, off the very docs that I have. I make sure I don't have it right. So we're going to go JSON RPZ provider from the Wagmi provider docs. Okay, and so now what we have here is this list of failures. So let me go ahead and drop this down so it looks a little bit easier. And so we're going to have this, and we're going to add in our own JSON provider, RPZ provider, and we're going to import. Don't look at the, this is that, what is it, Copilot. I've been experimenting with it on there. So we're going to RPC.
A nice tool, to be honest.
Yeah, RPC. And we're going to, and this is all in the document guide. I'm going a little fast because I know we're almost, getting into the time. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and put in our own RPC. All right. And so where do we get our RPC from? Like there's tons of places to pull this from. It's, you can go to Anchor, you can go to Pocket Network. Maybe you ran out of things from, Alchemy or something, and now they're charging you. So I'm just going to use Anchor for example right here, and I'm just going to grab Gnosis chain. Okay, so from here I'm just going to pop in my RPC, and so now I can then support Gnosis chain right here. And we are live. Did I just miss something? I'm just going to copy my examples here because we're almost out of time on this section that I want to cover. There we go. So you're just going to go ahead and custom put in your RPC, and then you have to add a chain, right? Because it doesn't know what it is. So in order to do a custom chain, I'm going to go ahead and just copy it right down because it's a lot to follow. But let me just go ahead and copy this in. And I just go ahead and create a brand new constant in the chains. And you can do this on an external file client or anything, but let me just take you from the top. You're going to create a brand new constant, call it whatever you want, Gnosis chain or anything. You're going to get the chain ID, like how you would fill in your MetaMask, your chain ID, which is chain 100. You're going to give it a name, the network that it's called, the currency that it uses. Decimal is usually 1800. And, if it was Avalanche, it'd be AVA. Then you're going to get the default RPC URL, which, we pulled from Anchor or for Pocket Network or any other location. You're going to go to the default Explorer that it uses, and they don't support icon URLs anymore. Either they pick it up or they don't. So let me go ahead and get rid of that. And then if you had a test net, if it was a test net, you would put true. If it's not, it's a main chain, you would go false. And then you would add it to the list here. You're going to go chain, Gnosis chain. And so now we've had the ability to add the chain on our front end. And let me see where my front end is here. I'll just put a new local host. And then from here, I can now switch to Gnosis chain. And then if I didn't have the chain available to me, I can add it. Would you like to add this network and add it to your MetaMask? And you could, and then you just hit switch network. And now I'm on Gnosis chain, right? So I just wanted to show that, like, I had a hard time able to, run my own custom chain, run anything, but let's go back to where, we all started from anyway. But I just wanted to show you how to use those chains to make sure that, if you wanted to do something out of scope that wasn't by default available on this, then you could. Oops, let me change that. get rid of that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel this out because we're not going to use that custom RPC. We're not going to use Alchemy. We're just going to use the public provider, right? And so now we've had everything we need to do in order to connect. What am I missing here? What is freaking out about this? Let me cancel that and see what am I missing here. My closer, opener. There we go. Let me just copy something here. I'm unsure why this is doing this, but let me just go ahead and copy this and paste this here. And I'm going to explain something in detail here. Well, I'm not going to troubleshoot it here.
Yeah, it's a code thing.
Yeah. Right.
It's usual.
Yeah. Okay. So there I am. I'm probably going to maybe misspell something on here and I'm good to go. So anyway, so there's a couple other things that I wanted to cover before we get into something else here is the default blue was an issue that I had because it didn't match my website. So what we want to do import is to be able to do themes. So I just added this because I copied and pasted, but we're going to go ahead. There's a light theme, there's a dark theme, and then there's a midnight theme, right? And so on our themes on the very bottom, we can change the way that looks. So we go to the very bottom, you can see the Rainbow Kit provider chains. I added theme to the list. So let me go ahead and close this out because what you were just used to was this, right? This is what it looked like originally. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this down and explain what I'm doing here. So right here, I'm changing the theme of my wallet address. So if you look at it now, you'll see that it's all dark. If I were to disconnect and refresh, let's see if it will let me disconnect. So there we go. When I connect, it's all dark. So maybe you have a dark web page that you have a dark theme. So you can do that right off the top. And you'll notice that the color of my button is now purple because I made some adjustments. So in here, in the theme, I can then change the accent color, which I changed to purple. I can change the text, which I changed to white. I can make it a little bit less, more blocky. If I didn't want the circular curve, I can make that more blocky by making this small. And then the font stack would be what I'm using on the current system. So whatever default font that the operating system uses, this is what it would look like. So you have a few options to be able to change the color, change the way it looks, and how it shows up on the user. So it matches more of your front end theme instead of using the default blue. So having these themes and the ability to turn on these themes is nice. And it's a dark theme, it's a light theme. Dark and midnight almost look same to me. So it's either light or dark for me. But I wanted to cover that because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do I change the color of my wallet, right? Before I even get started, it's just like a big blaring blue and I have like a different color website. I just did not, it always bothered me. So having the ability to be able to change those colors on the theme and like modify it was really nice. Okay. So this is pretty much all the wallets. Like now you know how to do a wallet. You're set, right? You have your Alchemy or Infura RPC or your Pocket Network RPCs, and you're solid. Okay, so let's go into actually building this website. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this, and I'm going to copy and paste because we're not looking at building a site. You guys would most likely know how to build a site. I'm going to just kind of get a base layout and then go into actually connecting the contract and getting into building this thing. So let me go ahead and copy this over, and it's mostly going to be down. So this is kind of our base layout, right? We have our wallet and some token, and we have two functions and some kind of read-only contract, right? And so now that we're done with our
Pretty
web,
interesting website.
what happened?
Pretty interesting website.
Yeah, don't hire me based on this architecture here. Let me go into, where did I put that list? If not, oh, no worries. I'm going to go right into the Wagmi. So this is when we start going into the Wagmi doc portion. So we're finished with the Rainbow Kit. Oh, it's right. It's literally right here. And so let's go over this way. And we're going to go into the docs of how we connect our contract, right? Like how do we call functions and how do we, like just make these buttons work? So let's go into the concept of pulling in an ABI. Okay. So an ABI, if you are lucky enough to have a developer or you are a full stack, front end developer, you'll have your contract, right? And you will have deployed it and compiled it, and then in your artifacts you would have your contracts, and then you would have your ABI file all sourced in here and be able to pull this yourself. So like I would pull this with the bytecode. For simplicity, I just pull it all in. So I go ahead and control all, copy, and then I just create like a new little folder that has contracts. And then I create this, contracts.json file, right? And then I have it here. And I just paste it down. And then if I want to import it into my page index, I would like import, and then I would import, let's say, the contract ABI, and I would do it from the, okay, hold on, my keyboard is acting crazy. This is not it right here. Contracts, contract JSON. There we go. Okay. And then I would set this to this contract ABI, right? And then, but what if we don't have, this developer, or we don't have access to this? Let's say we found this cool contract on chain. Let's say we want to make our own custom front end from the from like Uniswap or something, or some other cool dApp, right? This is the power of the blockchain. We're not committed, like we don't have to deploy it ourselves. If the contract is verified, right? If you go to a contract and it's verified and you can actually see the code, you can go all the way down to the bottom and you'll see the ABI files right here, contract ABI. And this is all the ABI files in here. So what I like to do is I like to do it in raw text format, open it up, and then I can just copy this whole thing and then create a whole other thing. So we'll just do like raw new file, raw contracts JSON. And this is just straight raw ABI. So the two differences between this two, you see how like I just copied this entire thing, like say a dev, throws this whole thing. You could kind of pull out the ABI separately, or you could just pull it with the bytecode. Maybe you want to deploy new contracts with subcontracts, and you can have this with the bytecode. Or you just want the ABI and you just want to have a website. There's two different ways to do so, but you have the option to do so. So I'm just going to go ahead and import raw, or just an ABI from, and then contracts, and then I'm just going to change that to raw contract JSON. And so the way I would, I'll reference that in just a little bit, but I'm going to make sure that we install the Wagmi libraries. But this is where we get our ABIs. This is how we communicate with the blockchain once we connect. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and go to the Wagmi provider system, and it basically gets us started, right? So once we've had our chains and providers and everything, we're going to go ahead and go down and connect. Let's see, migration guide, Wagmi config. Okay, this is done. We've kind of already done it with Rainbow Kit in a sense. So we're ready. We're literally ready to run a hook. And so the two things that we want to do on this profile is we want to write a transaction and read a transaction, right? So there's quite a few ways to go. This obviously overwhelming is we're going to use contract write, because we want to write a transaction on here. And this gets really, really overwhelming of like how this all works, right? So it's telling us that we need to import these functions, and it's a two-part function. And on the guide that I used on Vive, if you were looking at the Wagmi kit that I created, you'll see that it was just use contract write. And so for efficiency, they've done this thing with a preparation, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And that's kind of the key point. So we're going to go ahead and import this right into our contract in our primary interface. I'm just going to move this to the top. It's like, what does this do? Okay. So the way it's set up is if we want to call this function that we want to call, and then for our contract, if we look at the contract itself, I'm just going to go ahead and bring in that Polygon thing. If we wanted to write our contract, we wanted to do something like mint. right? We want to have this mint function, right? So we're going to call this mint, right? And so what it's saying is we need the address of the contract, ABI of that contract, and we need the function name all within under our app function, right? And so let's go ahead and copy this down, and I'll explain everything as we need. So we're going to be using the prepare contract right. Well, let me take a step back on there. So before, it used to be just like contract write, and you would just put in your variables, and then you would just send it over like ethers.s. You would do like ethers dot, connect, and then whatever function, and then you would send, your arguments or anything, and it would send the transaction. Because there were some performance issues on when you click a button, like let's say I click this mint token, and then it had to do all these functions in the back, you would get a major delay of when the wallet would pop up, and sometimes people would click it again and again and again. So what they did was like, let's optimize this, and we're going to prepare the contract before you hit the button to have everything prepared, so it's not grabbed right when you hit the button to do the function. So it's a little bit of a better user experience. So that created a lot of confusion for me. So they broke it up into two parts, right? So we have this prepare contract right, that carries all the functions, and then when we actually execute, it's going to get all this preparation and just send it over again. So this will be in two pieces right here. So let me go ahead and grab that, and I'm just using this contract example, and I'll explain in just a second. And let me go ahead and go about this and just paste that in there. And so now you'll see that we're using prepare contract right. So our address is not this address, but it is the one that I posted. Where is that? Right here. This is our Polygon test address. So I'm grabbing the contract address that was deployed at this point, and I'm pasting that here. And then our ABI is not that ABI. It is one. So we can choose one or the other. So I'm going to choose this contract ABI just to get a little example of why I went this way. So I'm going to go contract ABI dot ABI. Why? Because when I pulled this ABI in this function under this contract, I didn't get just the ABI. I pulled the whole artifact, right? Which has a lot of information here, contract name, depending on the type of setup you use. If you use hard hat, or if you use like the hard hat deploy or any of these plugins, or maybe Foundry, it might have a different system and it has additional information, right? It has all this extra bytecode and everything, while this one is just the ABI. So I want just the ABI for this. So then I just put .ABI to get that in connection with this. And then I need my function name, which is going to be, if I go to write contract, and for right now I did admin mint because it doesn't take any variables like for payment. So, and I took off the only owner, so you guys can follow along and do that. So on that deployment, there's no only owner limitation. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in admin mint. And so this part confused me a lot as for when I was looking at examples, right? And it would use config, and then let's say I would go into like, and I would copy this and I'd paste it again for another function, right? It would use config again, and then I would get an error. So like if I were to do this again, let me just go ahead and copy that and say, okay, I have another function to write before I finish this. And I do this, obviously I'd get this flag like, wait a minute, I can't use the same config. So what you do is something called an alias. So the configuration, you would basically alias it to another name. So this configuration would be, let's say, admin mint config, and that's how I would label it, right? And then finally, on my other one, let's say was feed, I would feed config, and I would have my own naming scheme. So I'm using the configuration for each one, but I'm not clashing because I'm not using the same names. Again, that confused me because I didn't know how to like expect that. And that was by an example that I was able to figure it out, that if I can give something an alias, then I would be able to make it work. So hopefully, if anything, that was one of the biggest tips that you walk away with today. And so now that I've had this preparation on my contract, then I can go ahead and get the actual use contract right. And so let me go ahead and drop that config and copy that. And so this is the part that we'll actually call when we are pushing something in, okay? And so if you look at the contract itself, right, if we look at mint, it does take an argument. It's like who, right? Because if I wanted to mint, I could set it to message sender, or I can do it dynamic. So I wanted to do it where there was a lot of examples where there's message senders like, great, okay, I don't want to pass an argument. So how do I pass arguments? Right. And that's where I'm going to go into here. And if you go down and you go into the list, it has a lot of details about stuff that got me really, really confused. Then you get into arguments, right? And so this is where optional. So underneath, we can just write in args. Let me go ahead and copy that in and paste that right into the function. And so our argument, if we look back at the contract, just takes an address, right? Oops, sorry, admin mint. This just takes an address. So I'm going to pull my own wallet and I'm going to hard code that. I mean, we're not going to get too detailed into like making states and everything. You guys, front end devs or however can create a state variable and adjust it on input. But this is just to understand the arguments passed this way, right? And so now,
Just a second, Billy.
yes,
So we have a question for you. Like, would you like to answer it right now?
yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah, okay, it's on the screen.
Okay, let me
It's from
see.
the Rich.
For use contract, right? This is from Rich Chart. Do you have to use an alias you made or config? So you could use, like, if it was only one function here, like, so because it's the only one right function, I could use config. I can use it, right? And it'll work, right? The moment I have to call two or more functions, then I have to create an alias. But if it was just one and we were done, then that's fine. But because I'm going to add another function, let's say you had two calls, it's like, mint a Merkle tree or mint tokens or deposit, and then you had something that had remove, right? Then we'll have two functions that do calls to the contract. So we have to use an alias. Does that answer your question?
I hope so.
I hope so. I hope so. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Okay. Awesome. So
So
then
yeah,
now,
let's move ahead.
yeah. So now it basically bundles up all this information, right? Or this possible, dynamic argument that's going to pass through this admin config, and it's going to pass it to our contract right. And now we have this contract right here, and it's taking all this data marked up and it's putting it in here. And now this is our function here where we can use data. And again, these are all reusable, and these can all have an alias. So data can be, admin mint data, is loading, while it's functioning. There's all these extra hooks that you have in the contract. I'm not going to get too detailed in here, but each hook that is in Wagmi has a lot of information that has returned. So you have this data, you have an error. So if you have an error response, it is an error if it's true, if it's idle true. So you have a lot of hooks that you can work with that basically you don't have to build state variables or anything. It's already built into the hooks. So you can play with that and just mess around and kind of clean up your code a little bit. Hopefully that makes sense. So, and then I can write, and I'm just going to say admin mint is going to be my name for here. So I'm going to have this, and I'm not even going to use these as well. And so now this thing is ready to be used, right? So we have our connection, we have our per contract right. And so I'm going to go down, and I believe I've done it out here. I've kind of just labeled it out, and I'm going to go, I'll kill this. Basically, the disabled means if I've clicked the button once, and let me go back to my local host. I didn't know this either for a long time, but if I click it and it's actually loading, like the transaction is happening, I can't click it again. So I disable the button while it's in the middle of loading so that I don't have like double clickers or anything like that. So theoretically, this should work. I'm connected. I have my admin mint. And did I change the name? Oh, I probably didn't have the right name. So let me go ahead and change that name to admin mint. And so on click, I'm just calling the function admin. The reason it has this little question mark and dot is because when it's preparing it, it doesn't know if it's defined or not. So there's a function that's in JavaScript that just basically has this. I truly do not understand this in depth as if it's going to be defined or undefined, but I understand that I have to use this when I'm calling the use prepare contract right and the use contract right. And there we go. I'm going to go ahead and prompt, and I'm hard coding my address in, and let me see if I have anything on the inspection console. I don't have anything on here, most likely. Yeah, just like a little mini error here. on my errors that I did before. And so I don't have any console logs. On the repo that I posted, I'll have a bunch of console logs so you can see the activity. And I don't know if that went through or not. It's still going. And so if I go to the testnet OpenSea and look at my wallet, it probably should show up. Yep, there it is, the DD Wagmi on there. So if you test it or practice it, you can see that it's happening here. So now we know how to write a function for admin. So another thing that I had a hard time looking for and discovering was, well, this is great, but how do I pass? Let's say I want to charge for this NFT, right? How do I pass a value? Right. So I'm going to go ahead and use this, I'm going to copy and paste it, and it's going to bug out a little bit. We're still using that contract write, we're still using that contract read. And so now I'm going to call a new function, right? And let me pull out that contract. And instead of admin mint, I'm going to use mint, right? And this is actually payable because in the contract, I said that's payable. So I have to pay some form of Matic for this to approve. So I'm going to go ahead and call this mint. It's too close here. Let me make some space here so I can actually see it in here. And so I'm calling mint. Here. And it's the same contract information. I'm going to go ahead and just say mint config, just changing the name and the alias. And I'm going to do this just to keep things simple. Oops. And I'm just going to call this mint. And if I'm losing anybody, just let me know. So I have all the information. This one doesn't take any arguments, right? Because it's message sender, but it does require a Ether's value, right? So let me go ahead and go into the actual Wagmi docs. All right. And so when we write, we're going to go down and we're going to see if we have overrides. And this is where I found out that I can actually pass a value, right? So when we override, if you use ethers.js, you realize that you have to use the ethers utilities and parse the ether, and then you send some kind of traction from the value. You can also write the gas, like let's say one of the RPCs doesn't handle gas for you, you can override gas value, or you can specify from, but we're only going to need the value for this experiment. So go ahead and copy that. We're also going to need to import ethers. So if I paste this down, well, let me get rid of that. All right, we're going to go down and we're going to override, and I'm going to get rid of ethers. And so we're just going to send 0.01 Matic, right? Because I didn't set a minimum on the contract. I just wanted to show you how to send a function on there. And then we're going to have to go ahead and import ethers. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and uncomment out on the mint. And I think that's the same name. I hope it is. And let's see if it actually works. Let's see if I know what I'm talking about. Let me refresh that. Let me connect my wallet. I'm going to go ahead and mint tokens. And voila, it's going to send 0.01 Matic by default. And I'm going to push that through. And then it's going to pass whenever it decides to pass if I speed it up. But that is the difference. This is what I wanted to show. Like you have different names, you have different configurations, right? If you need a passive value, you can do an override to passive value. If you need arguments, you can do the arguments. There's a lot more details into the actual Wagmi if you want to get very specific on certain things or certain requests. It's understanding how to get these documents in there. If I wanted to see an error, I had a hard time figuring out how to get an error here because I wanted to console log it out, but I didn't know how to. So if I wanted to get an error, if something errored out, I can just go ahead and put it underneath. So under here, I can just push that as an error. So then I can see console logs. If something happens in the mix, I can see what happened, right? So that's good for writing. And so there's one bug that I want to show, and that's for reads. Let's say, you want to have a minter count, or you want to be able to read something off there that displays on your website. There is a bug that I think has been fixed, but I think you have to do some changes on here. I read it last night, but I'll let you know what the bug is. But we're going to use contract read from Wagmi. And if there's any questions, go ahead and stop now. So let me go ahead and import that in. And so now we're use contract read, right? And it's basically the same setup. right? So it's the same layout, but a little bit easier because there's no prepare. It's just literally reading, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this out. And I'm going to go ahead and paste it just underneath this last one right here, right? And so obviously it's not the right address, so we can get this address. And I'm going to show you a couple tricks and tips on that to get that going. And then we're going to get the contract ABI, put that in the ABI. And then the function for us is going to be, let's go ahead and read. We're going to go into the read contract. And we're just going to get the total supply. So I'm going to get this total supply function right here. So it'll be total supply. So then we have this contract read variable that we can, just send it to somewhere, right? It's just a matter of a variable that we send out. So let me go ahead and create the supply data. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm going to give this an alias. Data. Oh, what am I missing here? What am I missing? What's going on with this read here? Oh, okay. When we look at the docs, sorry, did I close this out here? We have the data is the result, data is the error, right? So we want to make sure that we alias the data, right? We don't want this as a file. We want the data. And get rid of that. Go to data, give it an alias, and then we'll just say total supply data. Again, if we wanted to have an error or anything, we can catch all that. That's more in the tutorial. I see like we're almost down to 10 minutes. I just want to make sure that we are looking good. And then we can then therefore, set the total supply data to string. And let me see, did I change the variable names? Let me make sure that I have that. Yeah, I just had that. So I created like a state variable. Let me just go ahead and do that right now. I'm just going to copy and paste this here. So that way it would show up dynamically. So let me go ahead and use stake and use effect. This is more like website, stuff, but let me go ahead and use state and use effect. And I use the supply data. So I'm just going to go ahead and set some state variables, right? And so then I used an effect. So like every time you load the page or every time you came on the page, it would refresh, on the page. So let me go ahead and pop this in here. And so I'm grabbing my total supply data. So if there's any change on my use effect, I would let temp supply be that and then set this to, the state that I have here. And then I would update that on the page in my total supply. So let me go ahead and click this, uncomment that. And so I'm just reading the data, right? Like I'm just pulling data when it's called. So I'm just calling it on a refresh page for right now. Did I lose anybody? Did it go pretty quick? Because I want to answer a couple questions towards the end. If not, I'm going to go forward. So right here, I'm just pulling supply data and I'm just setting it on the front end. So if I go here and I refresh, you'll see that it's pulling from the contract and I get a total minted of 3, right? So the whole point of this, and there's everybody can design it their own way. If you want to have hooks or React or anything, it was more about showing how you can connect your wallet and connect to the contract and use your prepare and then deploy it. Connect your other function, create another alias. Make sure you pass a value and connect it. Now you want to read something from it. Maybe you have a whole bunch of things to read. Maybe there's an array of stuff or a status update. You would use the use contract read in the same way to get that connected and then just display that. I just use the use effect to display it constantly to make sure it updates, but that's pretty much it, right? And so one thing to keep it clean, because one thing, obviously this is not ideal, because if you change a contract and you have 20 different functions you would have to go through across. So what I do, in a sense, let me just go ahead and copy and paste this in here, is I create this contract config. on the very top, which pretty much sets, oh, let me change that here to this so it looks a little bit more of what we're used to. Right here, and let me go ahead and go token ABI. Right. And is that correct? Contract ABI, excuse me. Cool. So then from here, I would have this on every variable on here. So then I can just remove this, right? And do a spread operator and then contract config. So then that way I don't have to keep typing this over and over. It's a little bit cleaner. And if I change it in one location, it'll go. So you'd have to use the spread operator, but basically what it does is grabs this information and then realigns it right here. So if you have a lot of the same variables or a lot of the same systems, I create this contract config in the very top and then call it. I could do a process.env and then put this contract address on an env file and just have the contract address, and that way I can change it in one location. So it just makes life a lot easier overall to function and work, and just keep the code cleaner. That way it doesn't have to go, so in depth, and then you have one point of change on there. But that's pretty much it to get you going on, your front end. Now you know how to write a contract. Now you know how to read from a contract. It's pretty much all you need to get started in a simple website. Again, you can pull the ABI from any contract that's on either scan, Polygon scan, and then import it in, experiment. Maybe you want to create your own front end because you hate a front end somewhere, or maybe you just want to create a basic front end to show your friends, to have people try it out. Again, my focus is more on Solidity, and the back end and contracts. But having friends try something out that don't know how to use the blockchain is a bummer. So having a template that you can just connect your front end, this is all rinse and repeat. You just change your contract and your look, and you can use your front end for a lot of your dApps to get things working. And so now people can try it. So if you have any questions or anything, let me know.
I think like it will definitely save me for the backend thing.
Yeah.
Like I already know the solidity part, do the solidity stuff, but showing it to the friends or anyone, we require front end, and it's definitely awesome to use these tools to build up a quick front end for your application.
Yeah, definitely. So what I do a lot is I have like this boiler template drop, right? And there's a lot of tools out there. Waxy from Developer DAO, he has a Create Web3 app on there that will actually build your
Yeah.
front end and back end and have, Wallet Connect. Rainbow Wallet Kit and Wagmi already loaded in there. So you don't have to build this whole thing from scratch. It's already set up for you. Daiwatt, I think, had Create Web3 that had your
Yeah.
front end with Next.js and Tailwind built in. So those things save a lot of time. So instead of having to do like this whole thing from the beginning, they have these sets that are already set for you that you can use for your tools. I just wanted to do it from scratch so you understand what's going inside of it, and so that you can modify it the way you need to for your chain or for your dApp. And so, you can always go back to this video and look back and just, verify and check a couple things so it's working. There's also the repos that you can play with. You can connect to the existing contract, and you have the examples to do so. So I'm hoping that, anybody that was kind of struggling with the front end, I wish there was a workshop that was like that when I was struggling. So I figured I would make the workshop myself.
That's very cool. That's really a good contribution to the community.
Yeah.
So, yep, I don't think we have any questions right now.
Okay.
So, do you have anything else left for our audience?
Yeah, you know what? Anybody that is still here, I made a special NFT based off that
Actually,
contract.
I
Oh,
guess we got one.
oh,
Um,
oh, yes, that right call. So yeah, let me cover that really quick in here, right? So when we're doing dynamic data in this prepare contract, right? There at times there may be stuff where there's no argument, right? Because we haven't inputted it yet, right? Like it's a state variable. So like this could be undefined, right? And so if we get it undefined in our contract, right, it's going to freak out. So we don't know if we're actually sending a data or not. So it's going to say, it's going to error out before we click something. So this is telling us this little question mark here. It's telling us it might be undefined or it might not. We don't know until we run the function. And so when we run the function is when we're going to get this pass through of like maybe the state variable, or we actually get the address because they filled it out or it connected the wallet and it grabbed it. But we don't know until we actually execute. So without knowing what it is, it becomes very, very problematic in the scope of the logics of handling in the front end. Like we don't have any data until we need the data. And so when it's trying to prepare, it doesn't know if we have the data yet until it gets called. So like this is kind of some of the weird things like with React kind of system and Next, like it works in steps instead of like real time. So until that step has that data, we don't know if it's defined or not. And so that little question mark syntax is what helps do that. Now I can set this to another step and like grab this admin mint and then put it into like another const, and then function or some kind of name, blah blah blah, right? And then do here and then call admin mint, right? And then from here, then I'll call this without the question mark. Oh, I mean, this is a really bad example. Yeah, but I can call it. So now it's a two-step process, right? Where it goes to this, it reads this, and then I'm calling it here. And so then
Yeah.
it doesn't need it because now everything's defined by the time we run it. I mean, this is a really, really bad example, but I hope that you understand, like it's going through this step, and then it's going through here because I'm being called through another step. And everything's been defined before it. So I don't need that question mark dot, to make it work. It just works. So then I can go here and just call it without this thing. Did I remotely even come close to answering your question?
I think you did a pretty good explanation over there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So by default, if I just use it, just know, like, again, I want you to drive, not fix the car. Just know when you use this type of system like this and all the variables go within here, you're going to end up using this. Right. And then until you do that, yeah, it was good. Cool. Awesome. So anybody still here today? I just made a fun little NFT based off that very contract that I deployed on the GIST. So if anybody here wants to paste their wallet, I will airdrop you this special commemorative NFT. Just throw it on the YouTube and I will copy and paste it. I know gas is a little high on everywhere, but yeah,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and paste it down and I will send it your way. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for hearing my rambling. And hopefully you walked away with a skill, man, just understanding the concept of how it works and using a boilerplate for your own projects.
So everyone, that's awesome. Like, thank you, Billy, and everyone, do put your wallet addresses over there for a pretty good airdrop.
Yeah.
And yep, so everyone, do subscribe to Developer DAO YouTube channel and make sure to check out the whole playlist of workshops which we had. We are now starting that non-tech also. We had a fundraising workshop uh, like today only, few hours back. So make sure to check those out also. And yeah, thank you so much, Billy, for having over here, for being here,
Yeah.
and to teach the community about the front end tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
See you guys soon then.
Catch you guys later. We made it in the hour. Have a good one.
Yeah. Bye bye.